Hello, everyone. My name is Jody Allen, and I'm the Robert Francis Ings Director of the Lemon Project, A Journey of Reconciliation. It is my pleasure to welcome you to day 4 of the 11th Annual Lemon Project Spring Symposium. Our theme this year is 4 Centuries of Black Women in America, Freedom, Activism, and Justice for All. Before we begin, I'd like to share the following statement with you. The Lemon Project stands with the rest of William and Mary in solidarity with our Asian, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, and Southwest Asian colleagues and students to say that anti-Asian hate is unacceptable and has no place at William and Mary. We also want to recognize that today, March 25th, is the International Day of Remembrance of Victims of Slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Dr. Meghan Bryant, who is an archivist in the William and Mary Swim Library System, and she is also a former Lemon Project graduate assistant. So Meghan, take it over.
Thanks, Jody. So I'm going to begin by reading William and Mary's Land Acknowledgement Statement. William and Mary acknowledges the indigenous peoples who are the original inhabitants of the lands our campus is on today. The Chiro-and-Hakka, Nottoway, Chickahominy, Eastern Chickahominy, Mattaponi, Monacan, Nansemond, Nottoway, Pamunkey, Patawomeck, Upper Mattaponi, and Rappahannock tribes, and pay our respect to their tribal members, past and present. So I have the pleasure today of introducing our speaker, Greg Crawford. He will be presenting to us on narratives of pre-1866 Black women found in Library of Virginia's Virginia Untold digital collection. Greg Crawford of the Library of Virginia will share narratives of courage, perseverance, and sacrifice displayed by pre-1865 Black women in the face of great adversity that are found in LVA's Virginia Untold, the African American Narrative Digital Collection. The Library of Virginia houses local court records, state records, personal papers, business records, newspapers, special collections, books, journals, etc., that date back to the 1600s. Collectively, these records contain the names of millions of African Americans, both enslaved and free. The names are access points to the individual stories of African Americans who lived in Virginia from the establishment of slavery in the 1600s until its demise in 1865. They include stories of Black women such as Rachel Vinnie, who, despite having won her freedom in court in 1791, remained enslaved and forcibly taken to Western Virginia. There's also the story of the Collins sisters of Powhatan County. They were emancipated in the late 1830s, however, their niece was not. This presentation will share the courageous efforts of Rachel Vinnie and the Collins sisters to gain freedom for themselves and their family members, no matter the cost. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today on this important project that we at the Library of Virginia are extremely proud of and being a part of. My name is Greg Crawford. I'm the Local Records Program Manager here at the Library of Virginia, and I oversee the Circuit Court Records Preservation Program. We are involved with reaching out and assisting the circuit courts around the Commonwealth in preserving and making accessible the records that are stored in their offices or they have transferred to the Library of Virginia. These records stretch back to the 1600s. And so in these records is a lot of history and a lot of stories, and I'm going to share a couple of them with you today. But briefly, a real quick background on the Virginia Untold project. The project began in 2013. We received funding from Dominion Power and an LSCA grant to help get it started and get it off the ground. Since 2013, we've had uploaded 15,000 records to Virginia Untold. There are over 20 different record types. They're in the state records collection, local records collection, many different records. And the date range for the collection is 1655 to 1870. And so far we have almost indexed almost over 200,000 plus names, both enslaved and free people. Now this is where it all begins. In my work, and I go to the local courthouses around the Commonwealth, and I like to immediately make a beeline towards these drawers of records. These are drawers of records. These are court records that go back to 1700s, 1800s. There's over 200-300 years worth of history in there. And when I open up a drawer and I see these dusty records that look like they have not been opened since they got stuck in that drawer, I open the drawer and I hear voices coming from these papers, coming from these writings. And they're the voices of people saying, I have a story. Tell my story. I've been stuck and cooped up in this drawer for 150, 200, 300 years. But my life is important, and it is found in these records, and I have a story, so tell my story. And in these records are the stories of hundreds, thousands of enslaved people and free people whose stories have gone untold or unknown for centuries. And so part of one of our priorities in the project is creating awareness of these records, making them accessible so that other people can hear these stories. And the stories I'm going to tell today, the narratives of Rachel, Vinnie, and the Collins sisters, they started in these papers stuck in drawers. And so starting with Rachel Vinnie's story, there was different ways she spelled her surname. It was V-I-N-E or V-E-N-E, and it's pronounced is Vinnie. And her story actually begins around 1712. Her grandmother and her great-great-grandmother were indigenous peoples. They arrived in the northern neck of Virginia around 1712. A witness saw them coming off a boat in 1712. And somehow over time, when Bess had children, their names were, the grandmother was named Mary, the granddaughter was named Bess. Bess was about 13 years old. And when she got older, she had children. And somehow, we don't have it documented, her children became enslaved. And one of her children was named Sarah, and you see it here. This is the first name in this court case here is Sarah. And it's around 1790, 1791, Sarah filed suit in Northumberland County, seeking to win freedom for herself and her family members, including her daughter named Rachel, who was also known as Rachel Vinnie. And she sued on the contention of the suit was that she was descended from an indigenous person, a free Indian, as they referred to him at the time. And according to a 1705 act of the General Assembly, whether you were enslaved or free was determined on the condition of your mother or your ancestress on your maternal side. If your mother, your grandmother, your great-great-grandmother was free, then her children and all her descendants were free. If she was enslaved, then the children and all their descendants was enslaved. Sarah contended that since her mother and great-great-grandmother were free, she should be free. She was illegally held in slavery. And so she filed suit in the Northumberland County to win her freedom. Now, as the case was being heard, the enslaver of Rachel, his name was Charles Dunaway, he carried his family and took them to Culpeper County, Virginia, while this case was being heard. So she took Rachel, her children, and left Richmond County, Northumberland County area, and went to Culpeper County while the case was being heard. And fearing and realizing that the potential of him losing Rachel and losing the value of Rachel, the monetary value of Rachel and her children in a freedom suit, he illegally sold Rachel and her children to a man named Bud Ryder. He was not supposed to sell Rachel while this court case is being heard. He could, in Virginia, it was illegal for him to do that, but he violated that law by going ahead and selling her to Bud Ryder in Culpeper County. And Ryder assured Dunaway that he was going to sell Rachel where she should never get free. He was determined that she would never get her freedom. And so Ryder, while the case was being heard in Northumberland, Ryder took Rachel and her children to Montgomery County. This is where it starts here. The court case is heard here in Northern Neck area. And the estate of Rachel's original enslaver was in Richmond County. Took to Culpeper County, sold, and then taken down to the Shenandoah Valley to Western Virginia to Montgomery County. That was all around in sometime in the 1790s. So she was sold to an enslaver named Henry Patton, her and her children. And while there, 2 of her children were given or sold to Henry Patton's family members at the time. Well, around 1791, the Northumberland County Court decided in favor of Sarah and her family members all received their freedom, all except Rachel, because she's in Western Virginia, 200-something miles away, and never heard the court verdict. So she is still enslaved, and she remained enslaved for another 15 years. And then around 1806 or 1807, Rachel somehow becomes aware of the fact that her mother had won the verdict and that she should be free. And so someone informs Henry Patton, the enslaver, that Rachel should be free based off this court case. However, Henry Patton rejected that notion, saying, "Oh, that Rachel was a different Rachel. This Rachel that I have, she's not that Rachel from the Northern Neck area. That's not her. I'm keeping her enslaved. She's my property." Well, Henry Patton refused to emancipate her. So Rachel, her only course of action was to file suit in Montgomery County Court. So this is a petition from Rachel saying, "I'm of an Indian extraction. I was emancipated by a judgment in the District Court of Northumberland County. I should be free. I'm being illegally held as a slave. I'm actually a free person." So she files that suit around 1806, early 1807 in Montgomery County. Now here's the issue here's some issues that she's encountered. Okay, she's enslaved, she's Black, and then there's some issues that she had to confront was, one, she didn't have any money. She didn't have any money to fund her suit. So she had to sue in form pauperis, which means I don't have enough money to have my suit heard. So the county is to provide the legal counsel. The county is to assist her somehow. Well, the county is all white men, the county leaders, the judges, and so forth. They're not going to really go out of their way to try to help Rachel win her freedom. The other thing is that she has to convince an all-white jury that she deserves her freedom. And then all the people that knew her when she was the daughter of Sarah, who knew her to be Rachel Vinnie, they all lived 200-something miles away in Richmond County, in Northumberland County, in the Northern Neck. They lived up in Culpeper County. So she would have to go all the way over there and to get depositions of witnesses who could remember who she was and knew that she was a daughter of Sarah and that she had won that case. So that was something that she had to overcome. The thing is, there was a lawyer in Richmond County who was anti-slavery. He was an opponent of slavery. And somehow he learned of Rachel's case and was willing to offer his services to assist her with winning her freedom. And so his name was Fushi G. Tebbs. And Tebbs went to the courthouse in Northumberland County. He went to search for the 1790 case that involved Sarah and her family and the family members and the verdict of winning their freedom. he was willing to interview witnesses and deponents and help her out with her winning her freedom. But the thing is, Rachel was also an active participant in winning her freedom. She didn't sit on the sidelines. She was an active participant. She stayed informed with Mr. Tebbs and telling him and encouraging, telling him, tell the defense lawyer for my enslaver this. Share this information with my defense, with that defense lawyer for my enslaver. Share this with him. And here's a letter that Fushi G. Tebbs wrote to the defense attorney for Rachel's enslaver in Montgomery County. And you see the first sentence: being earnestly solicited by Rachel Vinnie to write to you as her counsel at law upon the subject of her suit for her freedom. She was telling him she was telling him, here's the people you need to talk to in Richmond County and in Culpeper County. Here's the people you need to depose and share with them let them know and talk to them and give testimony on my behalf. She also had the lawyer Fushi Tebbs tell the defense counsel for the enslaver, hey, listen, I'm getting tired of your questions about my identity. I'm Rachel Vinnie. I know who I am. So stop asking all these questions to witnesses saying, is she really Rachel? Is she really Rachel? Stop it. The other thing is, she, through Fushi G. Tebbs, warned the defense counsel saying, look, I'm not happy with the fact that you're interviewing witnesses and asking for depositions from individuals without notifying me first. I have to be present in order to cross-examine these individuals. See, the defense attorney was interviewing witnesses without telling Rachel and her attorneys where or when they were having these depositions. And Rachel is telling them through Tebbs, stop doing that. And she was active also in being present for these testimonies and giving of testimonies. The court gave Rachel permission to travel to leave Montgomery County and travel to Richmond County, travel to Montgomery, to Culpeper County. And you see where it says Rachel to go with her to the said places, Culpeper, Richmond counties, for the purpose of assisting her in the taking of the said depositions. So Rachel was present when Mr. Tebbs was giving these depositions from these witnesses. And that was a very important thing to help Rachel's cause, because with her present, she could tell the lawyer, here's the people you need to get depositions from. Here's where you need to go. These people knew me in the 1760s, 70s, 80s. They knew my mother. They knew that we were descendants of indigenous people. They knew that I was the Rachel who was involved in that court case. And she could also be there, and witnesses looked at her, and they could look at her physically and say, yeah, she's Rachel Vinnie. I know her anywhere. Even though it's been 20 years, I recognize her from living here when she was here in the 1780s, 1770s. So that helped her cause the fact that she was, so what I'm getting at here is, here's an enslaved person who's actively pursuing her freedom, not only for herself, but for her descendants. And so here, the problem is that the Montgomery County Court kept putting off the verdict. They would never meet to have a verdict in her case. Almost 10 years went by. She filed her suit around 1807, around 1813, 14. Montgomery County Court has not stopped to say, here's the verdict. Yes, you're free, or no, you're not. And they were kept delaying and delaying and delaying the verdict. And Rachel's now in her 50s, around 1813, 1814. And so she files a petition with the general court in Richmond to have her case moved from the Montgomery County Court to another court so that a verdict could be given as soon as possible. And so here in her petition to the general court, she says, your petitioner is the mother of many children whose liberty depends upon the decision of this suit. And should your petitioner die, their chances for freedom are greatly lessened. Should she die before a verdict is given, it would be more difficult for her children. They would have to file suit all over again, get all the witnesses all over again, depositions. it would be monumental. But if the decision was in her favor, where she was given freedom, it not only meant freedom for herself, but for all her children, her grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And so the general court agreed to have her case moved to a different court. And the verdict was given shortly thereafter, around 1815. And the jury says, we of the jury find for the plaintiff that they are free. Now get this, they assessed their damages at 1 penny, 1 cent. 1 cent, that's the damages she received for all the years of enslavement, of abuse, of toil, of not having freedom. That was the maximum amount of damages that under Virginia law for enslaved people who won their freedom was 1 cent. But Rachel was successful in winning her freedom. In doing so, she won the freedom for her children and all her descendants after that. And hopefully you see in this narrative that was found in a court case, bundled away for hundreds of years, the determination, the strength, the courage, the motivation that that Rachel showed in overcoming all the adversity of overcoming a judicial system that was totally against her. I meant to add that one of the other things is relatives of hers who were enslaved, people of color, Black, free persons of color, free people, they could not testify legally on her behalf. In Virginia, enslaved people, Black people were not permitted to give testimony in a court of law. So relatives who knew Rachel could not be used to testify on her behalf. So again, showing this adversity, all this that she had to overcome, she overcame it. It took 20 years, and she had to sue twice, basically, but she succeeded in winning her freedom and the freedom of her family members. Now, Rachel's story, it can be read in the freedom suit that's available on our Chancery Records index site. That's the style of suit, that's the index number. You can search for this case on our Chancery Records. It's not in Virginia Untold yet, but it will be added in the near future. We're transitioning to a new digital content system. So the freedom suits that were heard in our Chancery Records are not up there yet, but they will be soon. So, but in the meantime, you can search our Chancery Records index site, search for this case, and you can read the case for yourself. Now, moving on to the Collins family story. The Collins family involves sisters, the Collins sisters, Sally, Ann, America, Jane, and Judith Brooks. Judith Brooks married a gentleman by the name of William Brooks. But she was born a Collins. And in this story, and in this narrative, all sisters, all these family members were enslaved to John Collins of Powhatan County. But in 1833, he said that they could be emancipated. So in his will, when he died, his will was recorded, and in it, he stipulated the emancipation at not immediately, but after a period of time. I think it was about 5-10 years, or when they reach a certain age, they could be emancipated. Well, all the sisters were emancipated except for Jane. Jane Collins died before her emancipation. So she did not live long enough to know freedom. She died enslaved. But she had a daughter named Martha. And even though her mother was to be emancipated when after a certain point in time, but because her mother died enslaved, her daughter named Martha remained enslaved. And John Collins' heir, who claimed Martha, sold her to a man named Cree Taylor. And Cree Taylor had intentions to sell Martha in the slave markets in Richmond. The sisters learned about this and were wanting to have their niece freed. They filed a suit in Powhatan County for the freedom of their niece, Martha, and saying, so yes, the will said that, Jane was to be emancipated, but she died before emancipation. But it's unfair that Jane died before she was emancipated. It's unfair that Martha remains enslaved. If our sister Jane had lived, Martha would be a free person. So this is unfair. That's what's happening here. And moreover, our niece is going to be taken to Richmond, and we may never see her again. So please free our niece. Do not allow her to remain enslaved to Cree Taylor. Don't let her. We want to be able to continue to live with, see her, be with her. Don't let her be sold. Free her. And so they filed suit in February 1850. And so they were suing the estate, and they were suing John Collins, and he sued Cree Taylor. Now, a few months after they filed suit in Powhatan County, the sisters received an indictment from Powhatan County officials. The grand jury had indicted the sisters for a crime. Their crime, remaining in the Commonwealth more than 1 year. And after a law was in 1806, any enslaved person who was emancipated after 1806, once after they were emancipated, Virginia laws stipulated they could stay in Virginia for 1 year, but after 1 year, they have to leave the Commonwealth and go to another state or to a free state. They could no longer stay in Virginia. Now, how localities enforce that law varied from locality to locality. Some emancipated people remained in the Commonwealth for 2 years, 10 years, 20 years. But in other localities, they enforced this law. They were told you have to leave within a year. If you stay after 1 year, you're going to be put on trial. If you're convicted, you could be put back into slavery. So a few months after the sisters filed suit, they were indicted by the Powhatan County grand jury for remaining in the Commonwealth longer than a year. All right, here's the list of grand jurors. Do you see the name that I circled? Cree Taylor, the person who still enslaved their niece Martha, the person who claimed ownership of Martha, was one of the grand jurors. This was not about enforcing the law. This was about intimidation. Cree Taylor was going to say, you're going to sue me? Well, I'm going to take care of that. I'm going to put fear into you, force you to drop this lawsuit, and perhaps get out of Powhatan County altogether. Well, one of the Collins sisters, Ann Collins, she filed a petition in Powhatan County, a petition to remain in the county and a petition to remain in the Commonwealth. Free people who this was their way of being able to stay in the Commonwealth longer than a year, was to file this petition. And so Ann Collins files this petition to remain in Powhatan County with the local court in Powhatan. And the court heard a petition in January 1853, and they refused her petition, saying, no, you can no longer stay in Powhatan County. Well, the Commonwealth, the criminal cause against the sisters continued. And in August 1853, the jury reached their verdict. They found all the sisters except Judith guilty. The reason why they didn't find Judith guilty was Judith was no longer living in Powhatan. She and her husband, William Brooks, left Powhatan County. So she was not tried as a consequence of that. But the other sisters who remained in Powhatan were tried and convicted. The jury found them guilty, and the verdict was that they were to be sold back into slavery. And the funds generated from their sale would go into the state treasury. Now, Judith Collins, who became Judith Brooks, for some reason, she returned to Powhatan County. Around 1854, 1855, she comes back into the county. And then in 1858, she files this petition saying, Judith Collins, a free woman of color, respectfully represents that she was emancipated by the will of John Collins, late of Powhatan County, Virginia, that she desires to choose an owner, and that William C. Scott of Powhatan is the person she desires to select as owner. She petitioned for re-enslavement. What can prompt someone who has had freedom and enjoyed freedom to want to be re-enslaved? We don't know what why Judith chose to do this. Could it be that she wanted to be with her family members? Could it be that William C. Scott also was the enslaver of her sisters? The reason why I say that is William C. Scott was their defense attorney in the suit against Cree Taylor. He was supporting their cause. I don't know. We don't know why or what prompted this, but she goes back into slavery. And here she is, the court accepted her petition and she was valued at $166.25. And the funds from the sale went into the state coffers. You see, it says auditor's office. The Commonwealth of Virginia was involved in the purchases of human beings. Let me go back one slide, I'm sorry. The story ends with the will of William C. Scott. William C. Scott died in 1865. And in his will, he stipulated that Judith could select a owner of her choosing from one of his family members. Well, his will was recorded and signed on April 2nd, 1865. I think we all know what happened on April 3rd, 1865 in Richmond. It wouldn't be long before Judith would know freedom once again. So if you want to know more, I gave you a thumbnail sketch of the story. We wrote a blog on the Collins sisters, the Collins family of Powhatan County. Gets more details about it, and their story is also found in Virginia Untold and also found in our Chancery Records Index as well. And you can read more about it in our blog, The Uncommonwealth. We also have similar stories like of Rachel and the Collins sisters, of Black women overcoming obstacles, overcoming adversity in order to try to win freedom for themselves. And let me just go back to the Collins sisters. The Collins sisters, the reason they ended up back in slavery was they were wanting freedom for their niece. They were not going to be intimidated. They were going to be scared. They were determined to win freedom for their niece. And it cost them their freedom. So similar stories, you got Betty Chapman story in Lancaster to Lunenburg. James Webb's story, this is from the early 1700s, like 1701 to 1720s. Martha Ann Hobson, she was a free person who lived in Virginia. She traveled during the Civil War, she traveled under a flag of truce to go visit her son who was living in Massachusetts at the time during the Civil War. He was in school in Massachusetts. And then she came back to Virginia under a flag of truce given to her by the Confederate government. But the mayor of Richmond was like, wait a minute, what you did, Martha Ann Hobson, was illegal. When a free person leaves Virginia, they're not allowed to come back into Virginia. And so he had her arrested for that. But she said, look, I was doing this under a flag of truce of the Confederate government. The response of the court was, well, Confederate law does not supersede Virginia law. In other words, states' rights argument was being used against the Confederacy to justify Martha's arrest. So you can read more about her story there. And so this is the homepage for Virginia Untold. It has the search features, join and about. So you click on search and it'll take you to this screen here where you can do your keyword search, record, localities. You want more additional information. We have different record types that are found in Virginia Untold in a PDF to learn more. Also, we have a collections data portal site where all of this data is put into CSV files, spreadsheets by record type. So for those of you looking at doing statistical research on all these records, that's the place to go. Click on that, you'll see all the we put all the information that we found in the records as much as we could in those CSV files. Also, what's helping us out with Virginia Untold is another project we do have at the library called Making History Transcribe. It's a crowdsourcing site. We allow the public can look at these records and transcribe these records, because a lot of people have a hard time reading 18th and 19th century handwritings. So we have this crowdsourcing site allows the public to access the records, to transcribe the records so that they can be even more accessible to the public and to researchers. All the terms are everything is keyword searchable that is transcribed. So it makes it easier to find these records. So we encourage anybody, if you're professors and you're looking for a project for students in your graduate history department or a sociology department or whatever, if you're looking for projects for your students to do at colleges or high schools, this is a primary sources right here. These are you can't get no more primary than these records, because it's the voices of the people that went through these experiences. You're helping the people learn more about the history. And so here are the online sources that you can go to. The links: Virginia Untold, Chancery Records Index, the blog, and Making History Transcribe. So you can go to those links and learn more. So that's the end of my presentation. So hopefully it was helpful, and I'm willing to take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Greg. So audience, please continue to submit questions to the chat. I'm going to go ahead and start us off with one. Greg, could you please talk more about how the Virginia Untold collection came about and what the process was like?
The project came about through, we became aware of, back then they were called Virginia Historical Society, but now it's Virginia Museum of History and Culture. Anyway, they had a project they had just started called Unknown No Longer, in which they were doing a similar digital type project. And we were, and that encouraged us, hey, let's look at what we have in our collections, and can we do something similar or even collaborate with VHS? But the other thing is as we were not focused only on names, we were looking at records that would give narrative, to tell the stories of these individuals. And we have tons of records that do that. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning, is these stories have been hidden away, and we want to make these voices heard today. A lot of the things that I've been working on these records for 20 years, and particularly when it comes to the period of enslavement, I learned a lot that was not being taught in history books. I'm from Alabama. I took 4th grade Alabama history, 9th grade Alabama history, and enslavement was just like, we're going straight from the Revolution to the Civil War and talk about the generals. And I'm like, if I read these stories when I was in school, how would that have changed my perception of history, of understanding race relations today, of the legacy of enslavement? And you see, and so that was part of this project also, is that this is not about then, this is also about now. And from reading the past, knowing the past, and understanding the past, and hearing it from the voices of the people who've actually experienced it, of enslaved people, of free people, and what their life was like, it's also taking it to the day and saying, this explains a lot of why we're at where we're at. So that was also part of the motivation as well. But the thing, we have all these records, so we prioritize these records. We identified records that have a tremendous amount of narrative content, such as court cases, deeds of emancipation, apprenticeship indentures, criminal causes, criminal records, legislative petitions. They give more about the experiences of the people. And so that was part of this as well. So hopefully that answered the question.
Excellent, thank you. On that note, You are doing such important work with these records. How many times have you been looking in the records and had an aha moment? Because I think especially those of us that work in archives can relate to that.
Every day. I'm working on this box of court records from Lynchburg. And I just came across a court case right here today. It's in Lynchburg, Johnny Sweeney versus James Hare. And what they're fighting over, they're having a dispute over the sale of a enslaved woman named Minerva. And they get into the background of pricing of enslaved people, how they determine what the value are, who sets that value. But also, tells a little bit about her and that what the experience she's going through and her age. But so the aha moments I have pretty much on a regular basis. We just came across a court case that had a map or a plat, and it showed the slave quarters on the property. The houses, they were drawn, hand drawn on there, and next to quote big house. So we have these aha moments on a everyday basis because we're getting into the records.
Thank you, Greg. Many of the presenters this week have been researchers going to archives to find stories about Black women. What is it like on the other side of that research in terms of cataloging and maintaining archival records?
Well, we understand the value of maintaining the integrity of the records, the value of not just changing or disrupting. We want to keep things as in the original format as possible. We do get the records in the bundles like I showed, but what we do is we flatten them out, we arrange them, arrange the records and preserve the records. So, and also when we do the indexing of the information that's found on the records, we want to do that in order to make the records accessible. So one of the things that we're looking at doing, particularly with our Chancery records, right now our Chancery records index is only searchable by name. But we've updated our process and procedures in the indexing format probably about 5 years ago to now to include topics. So if someone's want to find court cases that involve enslavement, they can do a search by that topic. If they're looking for free people, they can search by that topic, rather than trying to go through a bunch of records. We maintain, like I said, we maintain as much as the original order, the provenance of the records as possible, but making them more accessible by flattening them and indexing them in a way that makes it accessible to the public.
Great, thank you. Let's see. You mentioned the public site for people to share their transcriptions of historical documents. Do you have any advice on transcribing for people who are new to that?
Don't start with 1700s records. The Transcribe site, those are records that we have. Those are records that we have scanned in-house that are part of our collections, our local records collections, and so forth. And we upload those images online for people to transcribe. But when it comes to wanting to do the actual transcriptions, if you're not very familiar with, say, 18th century handwriting, because I remember my first day on the job here in '99, I got a box of records from the 1750s. And I looked at them, I said, is this even written in English? It took time for me to get used to the style of writing and handwriting. Oh, and in a few months, I picked it up. So don't get frustrated if you're having a hard time reading it. Do the best you can in transcribing it. If there's a word that you can't transcribe, just move on. We do have editors who go back and read and take another look to make sure the transcriptions were done correctly. And so if they will catch those type of areas, mistakes or words that you can't do. But we also on our Transcribe site, we also have written documents, text, not handwritten, but text documents like typewriter stuff that you can also transcribe. Why we want those transcribed? Because we want to make them keyword searchable and make it even more accessible. So I would encourage people, if they were starting for the first time, to start with something from the 19th century and then just slowly work their way back and get more familiar with the handwriting.
Great, thank you. Many of us have looked through records in basements of courthouses in Virginia for days on end. Greg, what are your interactions with courthouse officials like, and how have they supported your work?
They have been very supportive of the work. In fact, there would not be a local records program at the Library of Virginia without the support of the circuit court clerks. Our program is funded from a fee that is collected by the circuit court clerks, and that fee goes into the preservation program here at the Library of Virginia. And so when they have been very supportive in that regard. Also, when we travel to the courthouses, we visit the courthouses, we talk to them about their records, preserving their records, and we provide grant funding to them to sit. Back in December, we passed out $1.7 million in grants to localities for the preservation of their historical records in their offices. But also we offer them the opportunity to transfer those records to the Library of Virginia to have our staff work on them. And for the most part, the majority of the localities have been supportive in doing that. We have records over 119 localities. The records of 119 localities have been transferred to the Library of Virginia, from a few items to thousands of boxes of records. And so the clerks have been very supportive. They understand their role as historians. I mean, not historians, but archivists themselves. They're responsible for maintaining those records. And in fact, on their website, the clerk's website, they talk about their duty to preserving the history of Virginia, about preserving the records in their offices. So we have found we've had a really great working relationship with the clerks and identifying. We tell them, hey, these records over here, you might want to store them somewhere else. This is a place where you can get water leaks from, or something to that effect. Here's a better location, or here's a grant to help you deal with that issue. So it's been very helpful. They've been very helpful.
It takes a village, right?
Yeah.
Okay, another question that's coming in. One of the themes that has been repeated in the presentations this week has been the role of public memory and public history. Are you and the Library of Virginia involved in any other public-facing projects designed to engage people who are not seasoned researchers coming to these archives?
We have, if you mean by, we have collaborated with other groups and other organizations in creating awareness of these records. Back on MLK Day, we were part of an event here that was sponsored by a group here in Richmond. And we were joined with other cultural institutions that are here in Richmond to talk about the legacy of enslavement, how it has, and how is it reflected in the records of Virginia, of the systemic racism that has been present going back to 1619. We would like to do more. We would like to do more in the area of public history, working and collaborating with other cultural groups and institutions. So if there's if anybody's aware of such, please feel free to contact us.
Okay, and Greg, our last question is there a way for audience members to contact you after this presentation if they have additional questions?
Yes. They can contact the Library of Virginia here. If they go to our homepage, there's a contact us page, and in there they can forward their questions through that, or they can contact me at gregory.crawford@lva.virginia.gov. Gregory, Gregory .Crawford, CRAWFORD @lva.virginia, with Virginia spelled out, .gov, GOV.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you again, Greg, for an excellent presentation, and thanks to our audience members for attending and submitting questions.